Welcome to the grand countdown of the most helmet decks ever in the history of Yu-Gi-Oh! We'll be exploring from beginning to end some of the worst decks that have ever plagued the game we all know and love. First off, to begin with, I guess it's important we set out a couple of ground rules here. Let's talk about what is helmet. What does that actually mean? It's probably one of the most overused yet misunderstood and misrepresented terminologies in Yu-Gi-Oh! Today. For our purposes, we shall define it in the following way. A linear deck in which there is very little plays to having just a lone, single, repetitive and common strategy in most to all circumstances. A deck in which there is a pretty much agreed upon standard list with very little deviations from the norm in terms of techs and is predictable in its design and in its strategy. So, what does that really mean? Can I do this play? Yes. I probably win if my opponent has no out. Can't I do this play? No. Okay, well, I guess I lose. Furthermore, I decided on these decks based on their formats as well. So context is important. So while a deck may be super helmet mechanically and even more helmet than some of the ones I'm about to mention, it may not always have been the case. For example, Exodia is pretty helmet. However, I would argue that it's not something that's ever been had too much of an impact. My point is that I'm going to be looking at specific periods. So while some of the decks may not have always been helmet, the point of what I'm trying to say is that I'm just looking at that one period in which I'm mentioning. So yeah, this is why I'll try refer to specific years and formats with this list, because like I've explained, not all decks have been helmet throughout their entire life cycle. So let's go on to the list finally. Let's begin. Number 5. Final countdown. Mechanically, I believe that this deck is number 1. It is the easiest deck when we consider it. But when we do consider it in context, this deck was never particularly relevant, and it was pretty inconsistent. And although it did top a YCS, however, and it's just because of this near irrelevance that I haven't put it higher up in the list. It pretty much did nothing in terms of mechanics, like activate countdown and then you use Waboku, Thunder of Ruler or Threatening Roar once per turn during each of your 9 remaining turns. That's all it did. Like mechanically, that is the most helmet deck in the game, but like I said, it's only number 5 because of its context. Number 4, Bujins, everyone's favorite. April 2014 was one of the best formats in a long time. We had a diversified field and a slow tempo for once that can only be described as a shadow to the Dragon Rulers of the previous year. As we laid out by the definition of helmet, this deck literally had no formal or intricate plays except summon Yamato, protect Yamato. That was it. Yamato.deck. Protect Yamato. You'd occasionally go into Sasano and protect him instead. The deck, also very easily took advantage of cards like Vanity's Emptiness, Kaiser Colosseum, and of course Royal Decree, which by the way was relevant because it was a trap format. Outside of should I send Hare or should I send Turtle, this deck really did nothing difficult. Honestly, it had a bit of player interaction in the sense that you would occasionally need to drop a Crane or use one of your Turtles or Hares. Yosenju, January 2015. Yosenju seemed like the budget player's answer to anti-meta, and boy did it cost a lot of Necros players some tops because of the shitty tiebreakers they got from losing to this deck round 1 or round 2. In terms of intricate plays and player interaction, there was little there. You vomit all your guys onto a field, and you occasionally protect yourself from dying with one of your 300 trap cards, and you sailed off into victory. The only reason this deck didn't do that well is because, like any other anti-meta deck, if your deck is reliant on drawing one of your 3 unsearchable trap cards to win, it's not a good deck. Even though it beautifully abused cards like Duality, one of the best draw cards in the game, if your deck can play it, it still couldn't really do much because of its inconsistency issues. Sometimes you'd find that you had a hand of all monsters, and other times you'd find you had a hand of all traps, and while traps do help you grind out the game, if you're not putting any pressure, well, then you're just giving your opponent time to draw outs to your traps. So for this reason, the Glorious Bronze Medal will go to Yosenju. The deck didn't even need to hit you that hard. It worked so well because you had 3 Emptiness, 3 Mistake, Dimensional Fissure, Macrocosmos. Pretty much any purple card in the game was able to be run in this deck, apart from Skill Drain, which brings me to my next point. Cliffort 2015. Cliffort took a big hit recently, but nothing will ever compare to the abuse and chronic degeneracy this deck partook in for the first 2 formats of this year. Triple Drain, Triple Emptiness, 2800 attack monster, unaffected, and when it dies, it goes to the Pendulum Zone, not the graveyard, meaning you still didn't stop the emptiness. Hint, pro players didn't use Sacrifice if they had an emptiness set. I say pro players in inverted commas because this was literally the hardest decision the deck could make. So yeah, while mechanically this deck is a little harder than Yusenju, I do think Yusenju is more helmet than this deck. But when we need to look at context, because I'm putting this ahead of Yusenju because of its impact on the meta. Yusenju got a few tops here or there. Cliffort, on the other hand, won a lot of events before the advent of Necros. Shaddoll tiers were everywhere. I'm sure everyone can remember that triangle format we had. Yeah. Nobody in this world enjoys playing against Triple Emptiness, Triple Drain. Can I just emphasize that point one more time? Triple Emptiness, Triple Drain. March Evil Swarm 2013. The most helmet deck of all time would have to go to Evil Swarm 2013. The polar opposite to the greatest deck ever to grace the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! Who or what was going to answer the mighty Dragon Rulers? Who was going to be the savior? Who was going to be that knight in shining armor to stop the Dragon Rulers? The deck that can drop its entire hand into the grave turn 1 and still win. The deck that can go plus 12 in the end phase without even batting an eye. The deck whose mirror match is easily contested as one of the best and most fun yet skillful mirror matches to ever grace the game. Dragon Rulers are the stuff of legends, and there will never be another like it in the near foreseeable future again. Moment of silence for the Dragon Rulers. So how did the Dragons ever occasionally meet a road bump? Well, in the off chance that you drew 3 Veiler, 3 Maxi, Heavy Storm, there was one card that stopped the deck, and his name is Ophion. Ophion is the knife in the darkness, the lie of the liar, the frost in the winter, the fury of anger, and the salt in the ocean. For Dragon players, Ophion was all that was wrong with the world of Yu-Gi-Oh! Skillless, degenerate, helmet, infuriating, ignorant, painful. It was the nightmare of all nightmares for Dragon players. Remember what our definition of helmet is, so we try keep this somewhat formal. This deck fits it perfectly. No intricate plays, no player interaction, no tough decision makings, linear as a needle. Except for one, that was make Ophion. Nothing this deck did for March 2013 can ever be considered skillful. This deck was make Ophion or bust. Sure, you had to think when you played other decks, but this is a tier 0 format we're talking about, so remember context. Your only concern is the Dragon Rulers, of which you're going probably to play 8 rounds of 10 in Swiss. So what does it matter? We're talking about Dragons here. We're talking the best deck in the game. Who cares about the other decks? You made Ophion, get Pandemic, and you set your dress. That in itself was enough to beat Dragons, even game 2 and 3. The only reason this deck didn't do better was, well, it's not as consistent as Dragons. There were occasionally times you didn't open Ophion. And because of the other 2 rounds of Swiss as well, you had to play against Judgment Books. And I think Judgment Books beat Evil Swarm without the Judgment part. So, that's that dilemma sorted out. If we make sure that we use the terms that we've set out in the beginning, this deck is unmatched by its helmetness. A couple of shout-outs to Deneb Set 5, shout-outs to Dark World, shout-outs to Dino Rabbit, shout-outs to the Wind-Up Loot, shout-outs to Lightsworn 2009, Judgment Dragon, Triple Charge. Yeah, that was fun. Anything else I missed out, feel free to leave it in the comment section down below. And remember, this is just my opinion and a little bit of fun. Please don't take personal offense to this. I'm probably wrong about a lot of things, but, That's all I had to say. Comment, like, subscribe as usual, and I'll see you next time.